Welcome back to JKMoto Podcast, a weekly motorcycle podcast for the everyday motorcyclist, covering current bike and racing news, specializing in track riding and club racing. We truly do it all. This week, we're brought to you by Working Class Customs, which is a custom fabrication shop out of northern Utah, and you can direct any more questions on that to Cole.
I'm Cole.
That's Cole. I'm Easton, in case anyone was wondering.
Hey, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. Same to you.
Another week's gone by, another week in the books.
Hey, not just any week.
The first week of MotoGP.
Correct. First weekend, first official race weekend, because it kind of, with all the testing and everything, sometimes it feels like it never actually ends. But it was a long break, and it was nice to have something to do this weekend while I was sitting on the couch.
And hey, I know we can get into this after the break, but on that note, did you see Alpine Stars had another zipper failure on your boy?
I actually didn't notice that. No.
Yes. Apparently your boy Marc Marquez had a zipper coming down during the race, but they didn't catch it during the race, so there was no
penalty, huh?
No penalty.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Not necessarily good news. Sweet. Okay. I think that's we don't have a guest this week. That's what we're going to get into. I did want to take a quick minute and let everyone know that if you're here on YouTube, thanks for being here. If you're not, we do have YouTube. You can check us out on YouTube. We have more than just the podcast, and you can watch the podcast if you want to. On the opposite side of that, if you're watching on YouTube, you don't want to sit here and watch us just talk for an hour and a half or more, go to the link down below, the RSS feed, find your favorite podcast platform, and listen to us on there, and go ahead and click follow on whatever platform that is while you're doing that. And if you're on YouTube, you should grab the subscribe button and click it. Click it hard, but don't smash anything.
No smashing.
No smashing. How do you feel about learning a tip for track days?
That's what I'm sitting here waiting for.
Well, sweet. All right. We got a weekly tip once again from Bittinger Motorsports. And this week's tip is take advantage of the track walk. Most track organizations allow a track walk or a group track drive the night or morning before a track day or race. You'll almost certainly see things or learn things about the track that you may never notice at pace. The track may have changed since last time you were there. There may be new patches or seams, and stopping on track to line up your corners or find reference markers can be of huge benefit. Even identifying available runoff can ease your mind coming into some corners at speed. So take advantage of the track walk. Once again, that's brought to you by Bittinger Motorsports. Josh Bittinger. They are down at MSRH.
That's good. You should always take advantage of the track walks. I agree with that one 100%. Even more to the point, take advantage of looking where the runoffs are.
Mm-hmm.
I know one particular occasion, I had never done a track walk at this particular track, and I had just done a track walk. And the next day, I had one of those oh shit moments, if you will.
Yeah.
Coming into a corner, and it just registered in my brain. I knew there was a ton of runoff there,
mm-hmm.
and I just very easily used it. I used the runoff and been running that track for a long time, and was always kind of a sketch corner. Was always really nervous about going off the track there. And once I realized it was there, that wasn't such a big deal.
Yeah, not too bad anymore. Yeah. No, I agree. I think you and I have definitely taken advantage of that a few different times, and you definitely see things a lot better when you're walking around at 3 miles an hour or less compared to whatever speed you might be doing. So
yeah, agreed. Some good, some bad.
Yeah, some things might need that's way bigger of a crack than I thought it was. But yeah, I agree. Well, with that out of the way, what do you say we not out of the way, but roll the intro?
Roll the intro.
Get into some MotoGP.
Yesterday at one point, I was in sixth. Miles an hour.
And we're back.
We're back.
And live and alive. And
hey, he said it. That wasn't me this time. You said it.
I was just trying to beat you to it, but.
All right. Well, what I want to get out of the way first, I think, is just quick standings in the championship, and we'll just roll through the top 10.
No.
No. Why?
The people came to listen. You got to get the GP fantasy out of the way first. That's what I think.
All right, we can do that. Okay, if you have joined our fantasy league, we appreciate it. I hope you guys are enjoying so far. If you're listening to the podcast and you've joined our fantasy league, that's great. Make sure you're paying attention. We're going to send some prizes out throughout the season, and I think at the end of the year, we don't have an announcement for the final winner prize yet, but we will get that coming to you guys soon. But if you're listening and you haven't joined and you watch MotoGP and you haven't joined the fantasy league, go sign up for it. We'll have links down in the description so you can join our league and get in. It's not too late per se. But I mean, how do you want to?
Yeah, it is not too late. Just to reiterate on what you said, thanks to everybody that signed up already. It is not too late. Go ahead and sign up. We're going to be giving away weekly prizes. You don't have to worry about the final. This week, we're going to give a prize to the currently number one, but we've only had 1 week. That's why I was a little confused there. We've only had 1 week. So the guy who scored the most points this week is also the leader of the league.
Conveniently, yes. But you don't have to be the leader every week to win a prize.
You don't have to be the leader to win the prize. You just need to have a hell of a good week. So get in there, sign up, and see what you can do. But this week's winner is
username Abellino Goosey.
Abellino Goosey.
So I don't have your names on here. We just got your usernames. So if we announce your name for a prize, make sure you get on Instagram. Go follow us at JKMoto Podcast on Instagram. Send me a DM, and we'll get the award prize. Sounds kind of weird. I've just said it too many times now, but we'll get the award sent over after you give me that info.
It's a prize. It's not. Yeah.
Okay. So anytime someone says the word prize, this is a little off topic, but in Rocky 3, Rocky Balboa brings his wife back a little bracelet, this little snake bracelet that goes around her arm, and it's in a box, right? He like brings her cake, and then they like blow out a candle on a cake. It's not even their birthday or anything, but blow out the candle, and then he like gives her this little box, and he's like, "Go on, open your prize." Open your prize. And so anytime someone says the word prize, it's just Sylvester Stallone saying, "Open your prize," in the back of my head. So
for a guy that don't watch TV, that's a lot of detail and a lot of.
I've seen the Rocky movies a lot.
Okay, well, I ain't heard no bell. So
yeah.
So anyway, sign up. Fixing to be a good year. I'm under the working class name, currently sitting at the bottom of the charts, but that won't last long.
Yep. You can find me at Jobert on there, Jobert 2003 to be specific. I think I did 6th this week, so not too bad. There's a lot of different kind of ins and outs to the MotoGP fantasy that obviously we don't have figured out yet because we're not in 1st and 2nd. So don't ask me for any tips per se. I had a friend that was like, "Hey man, is it better to do this or this?" I was like, "I don't know."
You can ask me for tips. You see how good it's doing for me.
Yeah. Ask Cole for all the tips, and that'll keep you and him both on the bottom.
All right. Yeah. So sign up. It'll be fun. We'll have some fun. As the year goes on, there'll be some surprises.
Yeah. And
once again, surprises.
Abellino Goosey. Go hit me up on Instagram. Anyway, that wraps up the MotoGP Fantasy.
MotoGP Fantasy. I still like Grid Rivals better.
Yeah, I am. I really just hope they come back next year. The article, well, actually on their website, it just said we're taking a break from MotoGP and expect to return in 2025. So hopefully, I don't know. We'll find out at the end of the season or, 2 weeks before next season. So, but
all right, back to your regularly scheduled program. What are you going to start with? You're going to start with the top 22 riders?
I don't know. We should probably, since we're back into the MotoGP season and racing season in general, we should probably talk about how the races generally are on Sundays and these podcasts come out on Wednesdays. So if you haven't seen the race yet and you don't want spoilers, then you might as well turn it off because we're not going to sit here and hold back and not give out spoilers. So
especially not on Wednesday.
Yeah. So with that being said, I want to just real quick run down the boring, this guy's in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and I'll give you through the top 10. And then if other people come up, we can talk about them after. So you ready for that?
Hit it.
All right. In number 1 spot with the number 1 plate, we have Pecco Bagnaia, also known as Francesco, although no one ever says that name. And then Brad Binder following up close in 2nd. Jorge Martin. Hang on a second. I need the overall standings. I'm looking at this all sorts of wrong. Championship standings. All right, here we go. Nothing's changed yet. Pekka Bagnaia, Brad Binder, Jorge Martin, Mark Marquez in 4th, Bastianini in 5th, Aleix Espargaro on the Aprilia in 6th, Alex Marquez in 7th, DG Antonio in 8th, Pedro Acosta in 9th, and Maverick Vinales down in 10th. So that is your top 10 riders, separated by a total of 24 points.
Well, I know it's only been one race and one sprint, so none of this matters quite yet. But
true.
Kind of surprised that Maverick Vinales was in the top 10. He didn't do nothing.
Yeah, that's true. You watch the race, and the sprint, it was so short and so focused on one person that I don't really remember seeing him at all. And then in the sprint, you saw him in the race rather, you saw him a little bit kind of in the back. Yeah, there he is. In testing, Aprilia is supposed to have a pretty good bike this year. They said they've figured out how to have one of the most stable packages, and I believe that a lot of the riders have said that they think Aprilia is actually on the top as far as aerodynamics goes. They've got it figured out. They've figured out how to get very stable, high-speed cornering on their bikes. So
let's talk about your boys at Aprilia's weekend for a minute.
Okay. I don't know
you still got all the stats up there?
Yeah, I'm looking at overall standings, but I can swap back to whatever you want whenever.
So you had Fernandez on a Trackhouse bike.
Correct.
Have an issue on the starting line during the race.
Right before the race. Yep.
Right before the race. Caused all kinds of commotion. Got pushed off, had to start his warm-up lap from pit lane, then had to start the race from the back of the grid.
Yep.
Did you notice that 3/4 of the way through that race, he had a malfunction as well?
He pulled off. Yep.
So I should say he ended up switching to his backup bike on pit lane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they pulled into pit lane and they had like a starter out there. It looked like his bike had shut off or something. So they brought out the starter, they brought out the laptop, and then everyone went wild because everyone's like, do we tire warmer? Do we not tire warmer? What's going to go down? What they ended up doing is just taking a full lap off the race. And then, like you said, he started from pit lane. Some people brought out tire warmers to it. I noticed we were actually talking about it. We're like, well, do they have power to them? What are they doing with that? And it was really just to cover the tires up and keep that heat in them.
As much
they didn't have any generators or anything out there. So, yeah. And then he ran off, actually ran down to quite a ways down to where his other bike was and got on his backup bike.
And that bike still didn't finish.
Correct.
Then you had Miguel Oliveira. I didn't see where he finished. I don't recall where he finished in the sprint, but he did receive a penalty.
Yep. He was 13th in the sprint.
Plus a penalty for the main race.
Mm-hmm.
His results were meh.
Yeah, kind of a bummer. He ended up, honestly, not horrible considering the penalty and everything else, but he was down in 15th in the race.
That's horrible.
Okay.
I mean, better than me. So that was really, I'm not rooting against Trackhouse by any means. Of course, I'm rooting for him, even though I still say the livery is disgusting.
I still like it. I'm still on loving that livery.
I don't like it, but I'm not rooting against him. But man, what a crap weekend for those guys. That's a baptism by fire.
Definitely a very interesting introduction weekend to MotoGP. Like, hey, here we are. Kind of. Almost not.
Yeah. And I don't know, how much. So my understanding is they kept most of the team.
Yep.
So before anybody thinks it or says it, it's not necessarily that they have like this, group of rookies out there that they have never seen a motorcycle before. They maintain most of the old team from last year.
Mm-hmm. I just brought a new name in on top. Yep.
Yeah.
RNF crypto data or whatever.
Yeah. That was kind of a fluke. I felt bad for him, honestly, but is what it is.
I was just going to say, it's weird to me, but I feel like, and maybe it's just because the riders that are on the bikes, but I feel like Aprilia has technical issues like that more often than any other bike out there, or at least we see them more often. Once again, maybe just because the people that are riding the bikes bring it up more often, but it feels like all last season, it's like, oh, this guy couldn't finish because blah, and it was in Aprilia. Or testing went terrible, or he didn't qualify well this week because his bike did this or that and whatever it might be, and it's always somehow related to some sort of technical issue with the bike, and it's always in Aprilia. So it's kind of interesting.
It's been well, I shouldn't even say that, but Maverick Vinales had an uneventful weekend.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I was surprised to see him in the top 10. But Aleix Asparagus, he had an interesting week. I mean, he was on cloud 9 after the sprint. He finished third.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Top 5 for sure.
Yeah,
Yep,
so the
third.
sprint. Yep. So the sprint we had Jorge Martin, Brad Binder, Aleix Asparagus. And he I mean, him and Jorge, they're best friends, and I mean, there was a lot of talk. There was a lot of talk before the race that he was the favorite to win.
Yep.
And he went out and did nothing.
Yeah, kind of just
Started bad, fell back, and never came back. Just
Yep.
kind of.
Yeah, because he qualified second. Just to put that in perspective, he was starting in second place on the grid. So
So the Aprilias, I mean, not to switch gears, but what'd you think of the aero packages out there? You know, seeing them go around the track, seeing them in full color and full glory.
honestly, the only bikes that were really like throwing me off, the Aprilias look a little bit different, but not that much. The Trackhouse, obviously, the livery's different enough. The Pramac bikes, I'm loving those this year. That darker,
Yeah.
nice kind of purple red color, they look great. The Honda really was throwing me off like crazy, and I think it's mostly because their suits didn't change.
Yeah.
He's still in an orange and white suit, and then the bike's like orange, white, and just has a blue stripe in the middle now, and it's kind of
It's too
I don't know.
much.
Yeah, it just doesn't work well together.
Since
Um,
I'm a livery snob over here.
well, and then on top of that, Honda seems to just take an arrow and they're like, well, let's just try everyone's tricks all at once. And so they've got the KTM wing on the back tail, but then they also have the Ducati freaking dinosaur tail on there. They have these giant wings on front, and like there's so much arrow going on that it just looks strange.
So to me, I think that the Aprilia, at least in black on the factory bikes,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was similar on the Trackhouse bikes, but it didn't show up as much in their color. I thought they were very squared off. I mean, they made the bottom of the bike much wider, and it shows. But the gas bikes, I don't know. Some of it has to do with liveries and where they put certain decals, make certain things stand out.
Mm-hmm.
But the gas bikes to me were wide. The bottom half seemed so wide on them.
I wouldn't say I noticed that, but I think from everything I've heard that wider belly pan or wider on the bottom of the bike is where they get that high speed stability. So I know that's something that Aprilia has kind of been known for the last few years, and people have been trying to take advantage of. But I mean, if you want to talk about KTM for a second, can we talk about KTM and the speed they found this year?
It was awesome.
It's insane. Like last year, they had these crazy launches. This year, it kind of seems like Brad might be qualifying good enough to make use of it. But every time they come down the straight, and it didn't. I mean, slipstream's a thing for sure, but it didn't necessarily look like that was what it was. I mean, those bikes they know how to put the power down, I guess, in the back
Well,
wheel. I don't know.
he had probably 10 different laps where he totally blew up right alongside Jorge Martin.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just ate him going down the straight and then backed off.
He'd brake just a little bit earlier. Yep.
Well, I don't know if he was braking earlier. He had the back tire off the ground a few times and just decided it wasn't worth it, I think.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, one. I mean, the passes he did make were also in that spot for the most part. Plenty of other places also. But the other thing I wanted to note about the KTMs, when you watch, they were doing an onboard with Brad Binder, and they had Jorge Martin's little lean angle sensor,
Mm-hmm.
and then Brad Binder's. You could see both of them. And anytime I've watched those lean angle sensors, it's pretty rare for a bike for you to see 60. And I understand these bikes are actually getting down to like the 61, 62, but they're there for such a split second that the sensor doesn't really pick it up on live television, right?
Right.
But normally you'll see 58 to 59. And Jorge Martin, you look at pictures of him, the guy can ride. We all know that. You know, he's out there, shoulder, head, elbow, knee, toe, whatever it is. Everything's on the ground, literally laying on the ground. But that bike was at 58, 59 degrees the whole time, according to the lean angle sensor. You look at Brad's sensor behind him, and Brad's down there consistently holding a 62. Like it's flashing between 61 and 62. And then I saw a picture of them Brad right behind Jorge. And sure enough, if you look at the bikes, you can definitely tell that Brad's bike is further leaned over. Whether or not that's good or bad, I don't know.
It's bad.
Is it?
I think it's bad. So you mentioned shoulders, knees, and toes.
Mm-hmm.
Jorge Martin, that's one of the broadcast favorite to show him in slow-mo going through a corner. And the reason is because that guy gets off the bike and he
Right.
is absolutely dragging his shoulder on the ground consistently.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the whole point of getting off the bike, right, is to be able to stand it up a little bit.
Right.
So if he's going through the corner at 58 degrees and Brad's just slinging it in there, Brad's in the danger zone.
Yeah, but if the bike can handle being in the danger zone better, in theory, you're going to have a faster bike.
Yeah, but what if he could just get off a little further and push it up to 58? It'd be safer for everybody.
Then he's not going as fast.
Allegedly.
Safety versus speed, man. Like that's the name of the game.
Well, I understand he's trying to go fast. I'm just saying, Brad's riding style, man.
He is nuts.
He rides that thing. That bike moves around constantly.
He is absolutely nuts. I'm excited for it though, because I think last year he started to kind of hone in a little bit. He started to get really good, and that made him go a little bit wild. But at the end of the season, I think he kind of realized, hey, if I bring all that good that I have and just hone it in and keep it and keep consistent, then I'm good to go. And it's looking like it's only the first race, but I mean, all weekend, Brad was right there up at the top.
So before we get too far away from the aero,
mm-hmm.
I wanted to point out, I hate all the new aero. Every time they put a new piece of aero on there, I think it takes away from the bike.
Yeah.
But that KTM, I don't know what you call that, but behind the front tire, behind the front tire, and Ducati has something similar. It looks completely different, but it's similar.
Talking about the wing.
They had a wing that starts like at knee height and basically a cradle that goes all the way around the front of the bike. Creates like a 1-inch gap all the way around.
Yeah. Let's see. See if I can find a picture of what you're talking about.
I thought that actually looked pretty cool. I mean, I'm convinced that Jack was trying to see if he could get it off the bike this weekend.
Poor Jack. He had a heck of a start in the sprint, and yeah.
It just felt like last year in both races, actually.
Yeah.
Felt like last year where you start out, he gets a good start, qualified decent, because he's a great qualifier, in my opinion, on any bike.
Yeah.
And just ends up holding up traffic is what he ends up doing. It seems like all of a sudden he's the rolling roadblock.
Yep, I agree. I can't find a picture of what you're talking about, but I will keep an eye out for that in 2 weeks.
Check it out. It's cool.
When we're watching again.
Yeah, I like it. The rest of it can all go away.
Yeah, well, anyway, I think Brad Bender's one definitely to watch out for, which I know we've got a listener that's a big Brad Bender fan, so lucky you this year. Obviously, Jorge Martin's coming back to prove once again that he did deserve the red. The number one's going to defend the number one. Bastianini kind of surprised me a little bit this weekend with his lackluster performance. Not terrible by any means, but... And then the only other guy that to go along with that was where was Pizzetti at?
Oh man, he had a terrible weekend. He just can't find his way.
Was there something I was missing there that I didn't catch? So I didn't watch practice qualifying 1 or qualifying 2. I was trying to watch practice, and then the rain, which I guess we haven't talked about that yet, but whatever. Yeah, we'll get to that.
Maybe not that I picked up on, but he just qualified poorly. He was low in all the practice in FP1, FP2. It was struggle bus for that guy all week for some reason.
Yeah, and I just remember like every time I'd look at all the people in the top 5 to 10, even I was like, man, there's so many names here that are all like pretty good, honestly. Like your top 3 in my head, Bagnaia, Bender, and Martin, which obviously have finished top 3. Those guys, Bagnaia, huge chance of taking it again. He's got a title to defend. Got it. Cool. Martin almost won it last year. Realistically, like made a mistake at the end, and you could argue that's the only thing that cost it. That's on both sides, whatever, but definitely going to be right up in there. And then I think that Brad They've got a really good package this year. The speed that I saw of that bike coming down the straight and Brad's ridiculous riding style.
So where did the other Fernandez finish on the other gas?
Mm-hmm.
The other Fernandez,
Yeah. 17th.
17th. So I was just gonna make the argument. The reason I asked that. So Jack had speed.
Mm-hmm.
Brad obviously had speed, both in the sprint and in the race. But Pedro had speed. And
Are you ready to talk about Pedro?
dude, yeah.
Okay. Go ahead then.
Pedro's awesome. That guy. So he made a rookie mistake, it looks like.
He did.
It looks like he went out, wore his tires out, which is fine. So I know the commentators were making statements about this, and I agree with them this time on everybody's holding back in the full length race. Everybody's holding back a little bit. So it's hard to gauge if Pedro was not holding back as much as everybody else. And so it made him look like a superstar. And then that ended up biting him in the end because he ran out of tire.
Mm-hmm.
And that's completely feasible. But when you pass Mark, how cool, I know you're a Mark fan and everything, but how cool was that for those two to get together on track right out of the gate, battle each other a little bit? And that was super cool. But Mark, you know he's got fire in his helmet.
Mm-hmm.
When Pedro passed him, he didn't pass him right back. And there's no part of me that thinks Mark was like, oh, I'm just going to let him go because his tires are going to wear out. You know he gave it a little more onion than maybe he was on the lap before once he got past.
Probably, yeah.
Still couldn't do nothing with him.
Yeah.
I mean,
So my issue and an argument for against Pedro Acosta, and it's not even because he's a rookie and that's fine. He did better than many other people on the grid. So I'm not trying to super down talk, but I was just kind of laughing because he qualified in what, 8th or 9th? 9th, I think. Yep, qualified in 8th, finished 8th in the sprint, which is pretty great. Cool. Got it. You're doing great things. Comes to the race right off the bat, zooming, going. Goes from 8th all the way up into 4th, right? Passes Mark Marquez. And that's pretty early on in the race. And I was like, what got me was when we're like 11 laps to go and he's in 4th and the announcer's like, he could win this. I'm like, what? Because there was this cloud, the baby Jesus, Pedro Acosta. He's going to come in and do great things. Mark's been talking him up. All the other riders have been talking him up. The announcers have been talking him up. And he gets somewhere in the race, but he did do it so fast. If you sat there and thought, and if you're a Pedro fan, I'm sorry, but if you sat there and thought that he was actually going to be able to hold that and have tires, he either has to be some amazing guy that just doesn't wear tires out, or there's no way. And that's what I said to, my wife's sitting there and she's like, whoa, is he going to? I was like, no, he's going to run out of tires. Guarantee it. And then they talked to Simon and Simon's like, yeah, I think he's burning up his tires pretty bad. And then literally 2 laps later, he can't even hold the bike on the line. Tires are smoking. Like, I'm sorry, bud, but you came out. You said, hey, I'm a rookie. Watch how good I can do. And then you proved that you're still a rookie. And you made a rookie mistake. And that's okay. You still did. Once again, like 9th is not a bad place to end a race for your first ever MotoGP race. That's not bad. But
he still beat Jack, which is the important part.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, you just ridiculed anybody who thought he could win. And I don't know that at any time I thought he was going to win that race, but I was pretty surprised how fast the tires went away from him. It was over the course of seemed like he was fine and then he wasn't. And
yeah, I think I think the bikes are taking a lot more out of tires than they used to. Because there have been people in the past that have ridden like, oh, they're going to run out of tire, and then they just hold it somehow through the whole time. And he just wasn't. You're right. It was like, oh, we're doing good, and then there was a pretty sharp drop off.
Well, think back to the race last year, though, when Martin was leading by like 6 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And they started coming down to the end of the race, and his times just started dropping seconds every lap.
Yeah.
I mean, they went away quick.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's the difference is now when they're gone.
Maybe. So I seen him move around. I thought he was gonna I seen it almost bite him a couple times on
Mhm.
that lap when it was obvious that his tire was going away.
Yeah.
But for me, I know you don't watch as much of the other classes, but watching him through Moto 3, watching him through Moto 2, he got a I don't want to compare him to Brad Binder, but sometimes when Brad Binder's sliding through a corner, I'm like, man, his tires must be gone. But then he seems fine. That's just how he rides.
Right.
I kind of have a similar opinion of Pedro. He's been in some weird situations towards the end of races where the bike's wore out. It's done, and the guy will still keep pushing through.
Mhm.
And so there was a part of me that thought, yeah, he's not going to be able to push to the front anymore, but that dude's going to override that bike. He's going
Hold it.
to be fine. So
Yeah.
I was surprised to see him drop as far as he did. Tires or no tires.
That's fair. I'm not gonna say I'm a predictor of the future. Usually, I'm just running through every possible scenario, and I was afraid and excited to see what you had mentioned, where maybe he got up there and then he can't gain anything more, but somehow he holds it, and he's this next like tire god that I cannot burn through tires, or whatever. But I mean, props to Pedro Acosta. You did great in your first MotoGP weekend. I just thought it was kind of funny. Like, there's all this buildup, and now it's just kind of like, well, he still has until Germany to be the youngest ever racer to win a MotoGP race.
Yeah, he'll be
And my
fine.
my only he's gonna do great, and that's his first ever race. I think having the sprint beforehand might have been what kind of did him in, because in the sprint it's just go, and if you burn them, great. You only have half the race distance. And I think doing that the first day, he's like, oh, this bike can do all these things. I'm gonna go get it. Goes and gets it, and forgot that there's the second half of the race. Maybe
So
we'll have to get
you
him
as
on
a,
here.
you as a Mark fan,
Hmm.
how do you? So I know that he said you got to give him some time on the bike. I agree. You've got to give him some time on the bike. I didn't expect him to come out and win that race, except I kind of did because that's what Mark does.
He does
And
sometimes do stuff like that.
but what do you think of his performance? Because at that same time when Pedro dropped off, I thought there'd be a push from him, and it never happened.
I agree with that. It might have, but there was also push from everyone else at that point. And so there wasn't like a Mark, I'm gonna go say, like, kill everyone now push. And I'll agree with that. I'm not trying to like talk him up by saying that, but in that lap where, okay, this is really where Mark should start pushing it, that's when Jorge Martin pushed it. And like, what are you
Right.
gonna do? I was very happy with Mark's performance all weekend. I think for the amount of time that he's had on that bike, and when you do actually take in a perspective, which this has been said over and over again, so I'm just repeating everyone else's words, but there's some merit to it, in my opinion. When you take into the fact that he's been on a Honda for so long, he's one of the older, if not oldest, people on the grid, and this is his first year ever on a Ducati. And found out recently, guitar is actually a track that he hates and has never done that great at. If you take that all into account, I think he did very, very respectable. I don't think he did the top of the world golden underpants. In the back of our minds, we're all waiting for Marc Marquez to just come out and be 12 seconds ahead by lap 3. Obviously, that didn't happen. But I think when it comes down to it, the sprint had me worried because the start was terrible. First ever start on that bike in a race, environment. And then it felt like there was a point where maybe some of his old muscle memory did kick in. And I was thinking about that and just trying to justify, like, as a Mark fan, how can I justify this performance? And then two, thinking about it from a real life standpoint, I'm like, no, if you've been doing the same thing every time, you're naturally going to do that. Like, if you drive home from work every day the same way, and one of these days you're supposed to stop and get something from the store, and you didn't remind yourself right before you left, your hands are just going to go home. And you're going to pull in the driveway and be like, oh, dang, I was supposed to go to the store. I forgot, right? People have done that all the time. I think that's kind of similar to what happened to Mark. Very used to riding one sort of bike. It is still just a motorcycle at the end of the day. I understand they're very different, but when we're talking about very different, we are talking about a lot of little minute details, and it is very easy to be in a race instance and have all this muscle memory in your body and your mind know, I got to do this to pass this guy, and this new bike doesn't like that. That's my take on it.
Fair enough. What'd you think about the start Pecco laid on everybody?
In the race?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was happy to see the race be the race that it was. The sprint, I was like, man, Pecco, what are you doing? But he's the robot. He calculates everything. Why worry when I
There
don't
was
need
no
to?
robot riding at the first of that race. That
No, there
was
wasn't.
I'm going to the front, whether I got a snowplow on the front of this thing or not.
Yeah. No, it made for a really good weekend. Like I said, I think it's gonna be a great season because the top 10 people in my head, my version of the top 10 people, which is almost the top 10 people right now, are all very good. This weekend might have not have seen that so much because a few of them were being kind of, who knows whether that's just getting the winter jitters off or what. But I mean, Bagnaia and Martin obviously kind of out the gate, ready to go. Brad Binder's right there with him, saying, "Hey, KTM can do it too." Obviously, Mark Marquez has something to prove. The two Aprilias, I think they're going to do the standard Aprilia thing, and I think we'll see a little bit more of the baby Jesus showing up. I think he'll get that figured out really quick. That is the one thing I think that he proved it was the rookie this weekend, but it's also a mistake that I feel like you learn it real quick and then you figure it out. Now, whether or not he can figure that out and pair that with good enough riding to bring himself to the top, time will tell. The only argument that I will give for Mark over Pedro is that Mark won his first ever MotoGP race. So when Pedro didn't, I was just a little bit happy. I'm like, he's
Pedro
not
would have too if Michelin could supply him with a tire.
Okay, yeah, sure. Blame it on the tire. If the tire had infinite grip, then yeah. For him only.
Well, I think overall, good weekend. I mean, like you said, we have, with the exception of Bezzecchi, we got all the same players we had last year up there.
Yeah, Marini's kind of out.
That's true.
But that's just a Honda problem.
Do you think he's wishing he was back on a Ducati yet, or does he got to have one more week to?
I don't know if he ever actually was happy about moving over to Honda. To be completely honest with you. Yeah, I know.
He chose that job. He took that job. That was a factory seat. He wanted a factory seat, and he's got one.
I'm sure he'd made a little bit more money.
So what you think about at one point I seen a comment from the Yamaha guys.
Mm-hmm.
They said that their sprint time was 6 seconds faster than last year.
I didn't see that, but
they were saying that look how much we've improved.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's 6 seconds faster than last year. And they said the problem is Ducati increased by cut it by 14 seconds. And I think KTM was like 10 seconds. And they went down the whole list of bikes, and Yamaha was a 6 second improvement, but it was still half as much as everybody else.
That's insane. 6 seconds in total distance time, like total time, right?
I believe so, yeah.
So you're talking a 12-lap race. It's still half a second per lap faster.
Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah, that's...
which is a lot. So we'll see what happens with the concessions and everything else, but Honda and Yamaha seem to be in nowhere land. You have Alex Rins struggling.
Yeah.
Morbidelli.
The saddest part to me is you look at their Instagram, like Alex Rins. It's like solid weekend for what we expected it to be. Still not anywhere near good enough. We will keep working and learning.
Yep.
It's like to see that from a professional racer. I mean, Alex Rins, I'm never been a huge believer, but he can pull some things off. He's won some races.
He's still going to probably bust off 2 wins this year and be non-existent in all the other races.
In the most random places possible. But
hopefully not Coda, because I don't want to see that again.
So going back to Frankie Morbidelli, though, you mentioned that name and that reminded me. He's on a factory Ducati this year. I understand he got injured a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll save my opinions. I'm just curious about yours and his season. What are we thinking for? Give me your expected. I'll give you a range up to 3. Final position in the point standings.
He hasn't showed me any reason even at the beginning when he first jumped on the Ducati, he hasn't showed me any reason to believe that he's gonna bounce back. I'm sorry, I love that guy, but best years are behind him. I think he's in his head. I don't.
Yeah, gotta be.
It's got to be, because ever since the knee problems that he had, he's just went downhill, and that was because he was on a 6-year-old bike. But he used, that's an exaggeration, folks. But he was always bragging about he was on an old bike, right? As soon as they moved him to a new bike, he's never done anything since. Somebody ought to give him back 2018 Yamaha.
Well, maybe everyone needs the 2018 Yamaha back. But anyway, obviously not. If they made a 6-second improvement, they obviously don't need that. But
yeah, they're headed in the right direction, but maybe just not fast enough. We'll see how what do they call them? Concessions. We'll see how the concessions do for all of them as the year progresses.
Yeah, concessions is when a team is obviously behind. Dorna grants them
concessions,
which is just essentially for this case, for Yamaha and Honda both, they are allowed a few more testing sessions, and they're allowed to make changes that other teams are not allowed to put that simply. Anyway, Morbidelli, I'm not necessarily a Morbidelli fan. Don't necessarily have a problem with him. Whatever, never done anything to really make me mad, but in my head, I am just questioning why he's on a factory bike when you have plenty of other good riders that could have taken that. I understand he got it pretty early, and we could talk about why we think that he got it, but we don't need to get into all that. But
from why he got it.
Yeah. It just makes me a little upset, because I think there's definitely other riders on the grid that could have made much better use of that bike. So anyway, I'm looking through. I think that's good. Yeah, that covers just about everything
I mean, we've got more to talk about, but to finish on MotoGP, it was a good start, good kickoff. I'm glad it's back. As a guy who watches Supercross, it does irritate me a little bit that I have to wait that there's not a race next weekend.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll give you that. I was looking yesterday after the race was over. I was like, oh, it's over. When's the next one? 2 weeks. 2 weeks will be in Portugal, and then 2 weeks will be actually, I guess more like 3 weeks after that. We will be back here in the U.S. So yeah, no, I just to back what you said and to kind of repeat. Sorry for the repeat, but I absolutely agree. It's a great first weekend. Plenty of excitement, but nothing too crazy. No big injuries this year on the first weekend, which is great. Everyone's looking pretty well settled in already, despite all of the big changes we had with everyone on the grid. Honda settled in at the back and Ducati settled in at the front. So we'll see. We'll see how the season goes, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. And that will wrap up our MotoGP for this week.
Yeah. Well, now let's talk about. We had some Americans and some foreigners. There was people from everywhere.
Sorry, I'm on roadracingworld.com/news/MotoAmerica-82nd-Daytona-200-race-results. And I'm like scrolling down because it's just a picture of Daytona. That's great. And then it says brought to you by curvygirl.com.
Really?
And it's a picture of there's a devil lady and an angel lady and just a classic pinup style women. And then it says motorcycle stuff, ... not porn. So the Daytona 200 this year was brought to you by curvygirl.com, which is motorcycle stuff, not porn. There you go.
Yeah, I'm going to look into that. Curvy Girl.
I'd be careful. It's spelled with a K, not a C.
Oh. Well, you already had me going down a bad path.
That's why I said I'd be careful. Anyway, yeah, the Daytona 200.
And the weather held up.
It did. But yeah, there's no rain.
I had kind of tried getting that out of my head a little bit because I just assumed it was going to be a wash and I was going to be mad. So I didn't.
Yeah, the weather people listened to us and sent it over to MotoGP instead of here in America. So you're welcome. For our listeners that love the American racing a little bit more. Sorry for our listeners that are big on MotoGP. We sent the rain over there.
So you watched that? The people in your household watched it?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, Ethan.
Tell me what time of day it was happening at.
That's why you have the app.
I got some highlights, caught the results afterward, and everything like that. So
What an amazing race that is. It's I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what to call it because it's not like it's an endurance race, but
yep, 100%.
it doesn't really feel like a full endurance race. It doesn't feel like the point of it is to break the riders and see who can go the longest.
I think
But
so. In my head, one, just for those that don't know, most of our listeners, I'm sure you know, but the Daytona 200 is the opening event for Moto America. It's not a Moto America event, but it is sanctioned. Is that the right word for that?
yeah, it's not a points paying
Yeah.
weekend.
So you don't get your Moto America points, but Moto America pretty much puts it on. They go down to Daytona in Florida. The oval track has an infield, turns into a road course. There's been races there. If you're if you're a race motorsport fan, you know about the road course at Daytona. If you don't, it's pretty sweet. Go check it out. But anyway, they head down there. They take all these bikes, and then they're like, "All right, well, we're not going to go around Daytona 3 times because that would be boring. We're going to do it 200 times, or at least 200 miles, which I think it's a 2.5 mile track, so what, 75 ish."
57 laps.
57. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it's right there on my computer screen. Anyway, 57 laps, 200 miles. And it's cool because I don't watch a lot of racing where you got to change a tire, do a pit stop on a motorcycle. And that is something that's like pretty, the big old gas jugs they bring out and they stick them in there and they're changing tires. And there's all this like, watch how fast we can change this motorcycle tire. And doing all the stuff. It's cool. It's super cool. It feels like this is gonna sound bad, but it almost feels like a joke that we do, but not a joke. Because it's definitely not a joke. It's a real race and it's real. That's why I said it's gonna sound bad. But it's just like a happy get together. Hey, every racer ever, let's just go freaking nuts. Let's
Right.
go from what we normally do and just times it by 3 and go insane. And also like Daytona, the banking at Daytona is crazy. And you can go like 7 bikes wide. That's probably
Mm-hmm.
exaggerating a little bit, but you can like the final lap, you end up getting 25 of them side by side, just freaking screaming down the straight. And yeah, I think it's super cool. All about it.
So it's cool there's a lot of strategy involved between pit stops, between drafting, all those things.
Hmm.
I think it's a great event. It's been the last couple years, it keeps coming up in popularity. And, back in the glory days of motorcycle racing, it was, one of the pinnacles of the whole world,
Yeah.
the Daytona 200. And it's awesome to see the popularity growing and the interest from riders growing year over year. That's why I was so glad the weather held up for them, because this is the biggest year they'd had in a while.
Hmm.
I love to watch the Daytona 200. I will point out that for me personally, I'm glad every race isn't that long.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's kind of, for me, it's like cool to see that once a year, kind of get that all out of your system. But I'm glad every race is not that way. But I don't know, it's crazy. So most bikes did it on 2 pit stops. Strategies. You don't have to put a front tire on it. Those guys pretty much have their tire shot after 20 laps, 25 laps. Very cool to see. Our winner for the second
Once
year in a
again,
row
second year in a
is
row and third time ever.
third time ever is Josh Herron
Yep.
on the Ducati V2. And I'm a little curious. Like, I know he knows how to ride that bike, but and I know there's a whole team of people. I'm not saying he had any advantage. Please don't go there. But that Ducati V2 seems to do so well at that event. But last year, well, it was the year before, he dominated the Super Sport class in Moto America.
Yep. 2022 season.
And in the 2023 season, that same bike was out there dominating again with a different rider. So it seems like, and I don't quote me on this, but the first year he won, I think he was the only one on a V2. He's the only one I recall on a V2.
That sounds correct. I also don't have the official on that.
But this year there was, a pile of V2s mixed in there. And they didn't all win the race, so you got to give it to him that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, speaking of Ducatis, did you see Kayla, who I always like to bring up on here, Kayla Yakov?
Yeah. So she's in, she finished 11th.
Yeah, which was it was actually a great performance, and she beat some of her teammates. On similar equipment.
Mm-hmm.
That was very competitive.
Yeah,
It's
no,
kind
I
of
mean, sorry to interrupt, but she is the first. There's, I'm looking at least three Rahal something Ducatis. Yeah, three of them. And she finished first at all of those. So,
anyway.
sorry.
It was a
Reading through some stuff.
it was a great race. Good kickoff, as you said. You don't get all the big players from Moto America,
Mm-hmm.
but you get enough. But there was people from all over the world showing up to run that round. I'm glad the weather held out. I'm glad they got to run it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's super cool. It's like a super, I'm just say it again, super cool way to start off the Moto America season. It's not points, but it's just kind of like I said, it's like just feels like a cool, chill weekend. Everyone come out, get your bikes, and then let's freaking go. And then let's do something that we don't do ever beyond here and this, right? And so it's also sweet because it's right at, Daytona Bike Week. You get the motocross in town the week before, and you get bikes down there going nuts all week long. And then the Daytona 200 kind of finishes it all off. And we're ready for our racing season. So,
Yeah. In fact, it looked kind of funny down there, where it says Daytona, where all the famous pictures from the cars doing burnouts on the Daytona or whatever.
mhm.
That was just dirt. It's still dirt from the Supercross race.
Is
Like
that what
it's
it was
also
from? Okay.
yeah. That's where they hold that, is right there.
Okay. That makes sense. I'll be honest, I didn't know that, but I saw the dirt and I was like, is that just from like the replanting grass after the Daytona 500? It got torn up so bad by the winter. Like, all right.
Yeah, we need to go down there next year. We're gonna need to take a whole week though.
Yeah. Well, we could probably do that. We could definitely do that.
So what
Yeah.
do we got? What do we got coming up? You mentioned it earlier, but how many weeks away are we?
So we got
Not to
2
go back
weeks,
to
2 weeks until the
MotoGP is
next
coming back.
MotoGP. Yep. And then we've got 2 to 3 weeks after that. So about 4 to 5 weeks, and we'll be down in Coda. And this year at Coda, MotoGP, obviously, but also, do you want to announce it or do you want to drum roll it? We got the baggers coming to Coda.
Yay!
Sorry. Anyway, the King of the Baggers will be going to Coda the same weekend as MotoGP. That's an awesome debut for them, for the world. I'm sure some people have seen it already. I think the Baggers is a very unique race series, and it's 100% cool. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you think about it. I agree. Sport bikes are built to do it. Baggers are not. But here we are being Americans and saying, well, what are you talking about? They can do it, and making them do it. So, and then just to make it all fair, we put a weight limit on the low end of the bike rather than the top end. And it has to weigh at least 600 freaking pounds. So,
So this is a bit of a tangent, but you've been quoted as saying multiple times that they need to bring more bikes into that class, more brands, more manufacturers,
mm-hmm,
and that's probably never going to happen.
mm-hmm.
But I know you didn't. But if you watch the hooligan races have BMWs, KTMs, Harley Davidsons, Indians, and they had some Suzukis out there. I think. No, maybe not. Yamahas for sure.
All right.
MT-09s, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I mean, it could
Things
happen.
are shaping up. Yeah. I mean, you never know. You never know. And the bigger question for most people is would Harley and Indian let them show up? I think they should. I'll say it again. You just said I've been quoted. Here's the quote right here. I think 100% because you put any other brand in there and Harley's still going to spank them every single weekend. So that's just my take on it. And what better way to sell Harleys to Americans than bring in a non-American brand and say, hey, look, we're still better. Buy our bike. But yeah, that will be down at Coda same weekend as MotoGP. Super stoked. We'll be down at Coda that weekend, so I'll give you the down and dirty of what it's like to actually see the baggers in person, which we've seen before, but in person with MotoGP there. I
Yep.
think that's going to be the most interesting part to me, is that I'm hoping the bagger crowd that I saw when I went to Road Atlanta last year was what you would expect and what you would want it to be, right? And the people that were at MotoGP, a couple of those, not very many, because it's sport bike racing, and a bagger guy doesn't care about that. But I'm hoping that it brings in just a few more, and that
It will.
we
It
have a
will.
good crowd. So
It definitely will. But I want to see. I'm curious. I'm sure it'll be over by the time the race comes. But when they go out for like FP1, the
Mhm.
baggers, I don't know what their schedule exactly is, but that first time they go out there, I guarantee you're going to have most of your top tier MotoGP riders on the fence just to see what that looks like.
yeah, I would be sad if you didn't.
Yeah,
But
they'll be
I,
they'll be
I
out there.
I agree. You know, I want to be surprised. I don't think it'd be possible, but yeah, let me paint you a picture. Imagine, the end of the day, and Jack Miller's just like, "Hey, bud, come on, you can go ride this. I'll ride that. Just let me see what it's like." Or honestly, any of them. But yeah,
Yeah,
almost 100% guarantee.
be
I
a bad
imagine there's.
deal if they both had better results.
Yeah, that would be a little rough. But no, it's super cool. The baggers are nuts. If you haven't checked out King of the Baggers, check it out. If you got friends that are not into sport bikes and not into racing and you want to get them into it, I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to do it, because you start
Agreed.
telling people about Harley road glides, racing around racetracks with their knee on the ground, and people start to, their ears kind of perk up a little bit, and they're like, what are you talking about? So it's super awesome to watch. The guys that are riding those things they're all super cool, and they have fun with it, as they should. So that's all I need to say about that. I don't know, beyond that, I don't have a whole lot for this week. So,
Well, on that note, let's call it.
all right, sounds good to me. Once again, if you're still here, click the subscribe button down below if you haven't. Throw a like on the video. Leave us your comments for where you're listening from, and then go join
Sign
the
up for the fantasy.
Yeah, thank you. Sign up for fantasy, and if we announce your name, you got to get on Instagram and send me a message and let me know who you are, because otherwise I can't send you anything. And if I get 20 messages, then no one gets anything. So let's keep it as honest as we can here.
Daddy has laid down the law.
Yeah. So, and with that being said, thanks for listening. Appreciate you guys' support, and we will see you all next week.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. See you later.